Hello, everyone.
Welcome to episode 17, season 2 of the Everyone Belongs podcast.
This podcast almost didn't happen this week, but because both Ben and I have been sick with the flu. No, not coronavirus, but the flu. But I just got better. So I didn't know if we were going to be able to do this, but we pulled it off.
Dang, I totally forgot my water. You gonna pour that coffee yet?
I'm going to pour the coffee.
So did I say my name already? I forget. I'm Ben.
I'm Cammie.
And we are a group of two people.
Is that a group? I guess it's a group, right? More than one?
Getting into the topic of this podcast, you'll know why it's a little bit weird to introduce ourselves. I'm not going to say that we're the M word. I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to make you wonder. And we do this podcast because we wanted to share our story of some of the transition that we've gone through in the last number of years and how this has landed us on some beliefs that we are more excited about in our life. I don't know. I don't want to say more. I don't want to use a comparative word. I just want to say we're excited about because we feel like these beliefs are bigger and more inclusive of other people and growth and relationships.
And they're relevant to where we're at now, which I think therefore does make us more excited about it.
Cheers, by the way.
Because of that reason.
Oh, that's hot. That's good, though. Okay, this week, man, I'm taking off my sweatshirt here. There's daylight outside. This is a first. I've never seen, well, it's been a long time since I've seen daylight. Well, recording a podcast just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And, okay, let's do a short introduction. Let's get the hell into it and not procrastinate any further.
Okay.
So sorry if we're sniffing and coughing and stuff. We'll try and do that away from the microphone, but we're sick. We're healing.
We're healing.
So this is one of those episodes that some people are going to be like, what the hell? And I would just say, if you've been around us for a while, ride it out. Give us the hour, and it will be less than an hour.
Some people might have seen this coming.
I think a lot of people, it'll make sense. And also, this is one of those, like, this could be... It's such a big deal to most people, I think, that it could be like the season finale. But we're just going to toss it out front because this is the order at which it happened in our life. And although we haven't talked about it much, it has had, that's kind of what we've been doing. Uh-oh, Cammie's dying. Cammie, where are you going? All right, well... It's just me, guys. Cammie, she was a good partner for all these years. And we're going to miss her. So I'm thinking maybe we'll switch this episode up to things that we appreciated about Cammie while she was here for these 39 years. She almost made it 40. And I have a lot of fond memories about her. Oh! You're back?
Oh my God.
Oh, babes.
You know when you try not to cough and it makes you choke on your own spit and then you feel like you're going to die? Well, that's just what happened.
I feel like that happens to you more than the average person.
I think it's anxiety related.
I think you do it to yourself.
I'm like, don't cough. And then I'm like, starting to die. It's horrible. It's not easy being me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got to get into this. So I want to talk real quick, just a few kind of disclaimers, because some people are just going to read the title and then they're going to speculate. More of these are people in our previous ex-life. They were friends with the old Ben and Cammie. And I want to talk about what this talk is. This talk is about questioning the ideal of monogamy. Okay? No one is saying monogamy is bad, monogamy is stupid, regardless of what this podcast is titled. Yeah. This isn't an anti-monogamy talk, but this is, I do think that this social institution played a very strong role in our life. And I want to get into our story of this. And we've shared bits and pieces of our story on season 1, specifically about our singleness. We got married relatively early, but in that time period, let's just talk about our teen years, specifically our teen years in ministry. Are you okay over there?
Sorry. I think I'm going to be okay.
One of the things I remember feeling, and a lot of these things have to be feelings, because it's only from giving credibility to my feelings that I can begin to parse together. There's like what you're taught, and then there's like what you're actually taught.
Yeah.
And at church, our church growing up, there's a lot of things that were said, but some of the most important lessons were not said.
Yeah.
They were believed, and they were taught just as explicitly.
Because there's a lot of things that if you said it explicitly, it would burst the bubble of, oh, this isn't that great, is it? Or this actually is kind of a shitty thing to say. So you kind of, even in a subconscious way, I think a lot of the beliefs were cloaked to make them more palatable.
And one of the things that wasn't said, but that was explicitly believed by I think almost everyone, was that it's better to be married. And when you're single,
you're just waiting to get married.
You're kind of like a sub-citizen.
Yeah.
And that's a really fascinating perspective. So not only...
Fascinating is a nice word for it.
How would you say it?
It's quite limiting.
Well, and I guess I want to be... To tell the story, I want to get into our perspective of what did 17-year-old Cammie think of that? How did you feel?
I think it affected me negatively even back then because how did I feel?
Yeah.
I felt like 90% of my thoughts and actions were taken over by marriage.
Really?
I think so. I mean, maybe that's a higher than it was, but I think a like more than half were taken up with. And so the reason why I say that's negative is I just think there's so many other things I could have been thinking about, but I think there was so much pressure.
Like humping? Or like...
Sure, my own sexuality. I mean,
really?
If I lived in another world, I'm
talking about 17-year-old Cammie on planet Earth in Federal Way. What were you thinking about? What did you think about singleness and marriage?
I think I saw singleness as it's okay if you're young because you're still figuring shit out. And you got time to get married.
You're still figuring shoot out. That's what 17-year-old Cammie would have said.
Yeah, exactly.
Crud. Still figuring crud out.
Just figuring stuff out. But I think I thought marriage was my ultimate goal in life. That's what it ought to be. Other than like following God.
Did you ever think that you wouldn't get married?
Maybe. I think the thought crossed my mind, but I didn't really. I mean, I got married when I was 20, so
I know. I'm talking about 17-year-old Cammie. Did you ever think, oh, maybe I just won't get married?
I might have. I don't honestly remember. I do. I think I kind of thought I would get married. I don't think I was one of those people that was like, yeah, I might not ever get married. I don't think I was that.
But did you ever like think maybe I won't find the person or whatever? Because I feel like that was painted as like worse than homelessness.
I was worried about that. Like I was worried that I wouldn't find the one.
Because the thought never occurred to me that I would not get married. I mean, I think it was like my worst nightmare.
Same here. I don't think I thought that either. I think I just figured, oh, God will bring the one to me when it's the right time. Like I had this way of viewing it all.
And in a way, growing up, like we were around divorced people, although it was like fairly rare or limited because we were mostly surrounded by religious people, and a divorce was like a big deal.
It was like the people that we were around, if they were divorced, it's because their spouse left them, or they left their spouse only if they were unfaithful. Like, I don't think there's any other category where we would have been around divorced people for other reasons.
And we look down upon divorced people.
Yeah.
But I actually think we look down upon old single people
Yeah.
more than we look down on divorced people.
Yeah.
Like if you were single, we were like,
whoa, what's wrong with you? Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, absolutely. Which is, sad to think
And
about.
another thing that I remember about this time period was, and I think we've done episodes on this podcast. I don't even remember, but we talked about purity culture in our purity movement days, and I Kissed Dating Goodbye and that kind of stuff. And sin oftentimes for the single person was defined by not how it actually hurt you right now, not actually how it hurt another person or violated their consent right now, but how it violated your future spouse, who you didn't even know who they were. Like they didn't even necessarily exist. Like you might not even be getting married. It's not like you're engaged or something like that. But like, for example,
just in case, it was
this
fire
thing.
insurance.
Well, it's not like just in case. It's like assumed. That's what I mean. It's like you live into this ideal. And when we say marriage, we're talking about marriage, one man, one woman, no divorce possibility for a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's the type of monogamy that we grew up hearing and believing about. So like if I remember when I kissed my girlfriend, I remember feeling like I was cheating on my wife, even though I was 16, not married. You wouldn't even write me back in California. and that was like, there was that type of thing. I mean, Joshua Harris, who's apologized for, I think, a lot of this type of imagery, but used this type of language in I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and it was taken over by youth group circles, which is like any person you have sex with, which was out of my wildest dreams at this time period. You're like essentially cheating with, or
or you're like marrying them somehow.
The threat was like you're taking that relationship someday into bed with your future spouse. But it's all about this future spouse, which kind of assumes, I mean, I guess what happens if you never have a future spouse, like were you ever sinning against that person? Or is that like a way that we process sin against other people? Anyways.
I feel like it was a way to keep young people in check, like to keep them from messing around with their own sexuality.
I think it's a way to train people up in monogamy.
That too, yeah.
Which
definitely.
It's kind of funny because that's actually the theme of this episode. So that maybe that's why this section is here.
Yeah.
There was also a massive emphasis on being incomplete. You know, we talked about this story in Genesis. Yeah. What was it? Genesis 1?
Yeah, like when it was just Adam in the garden. And God looked at Adam and said, "You're not complete.
So
I'm gonna make you a helper suitable. Take out one of your ribs."
And how for the rest of your life, like you're going to need a helper. You're going to need to be complete. You're going to need a partner. You're going to need, but it wasn't just like a partner or a friend. It was like you need to be monogamously, faithfully married. That's the solution here. And you're not complete until you do that. So I mean, youth group culture like really reinforced this, but I don't think this is a strictly religious ideal at all. Everything from all the Disney movies I watched to Titanic, which was one of my favorite movies as a teenager, all reinforced this idea that true bliss will be found in not just humanity, not necessarily God, not family, but in a singular other person that loves and pursues you as much as you love and pursue them.
Right.
That was the idea.
Which, you know, when you say it that way, I'm like, well, that's actually kind of nice. Like, there's nothing wrong with that idea as far as the idea goes. But when you think that's the only idea, and then you think that everyone should follow this idea, that's where I think you run into problems. There's a lot of people that don't fit that mold. And what do you do with those people?
So I loved this idea of being in love.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, you did.
You did not make it easy for me, I'll tell you what. But maybe that's the best. Like, because if I had an easy girl, that would be like I'm not the type of guy that goes after the easy thing. I like the challenge.
That can be taken so many different ways. I love it.
Take it the way that you want. Take it the best way. I don't care how you do it. It's the truth. Mm-hmm. But I was like secretly into romance novels. Those weren't like allowed for us. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even, the sex was interesting too, but I'm not even talking about the sex. I'm just talking about that being known by another and being wanted as much as I wanted them. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, there's that phrase, being in love with love, or falling in love with the idea of being in love, or something like that. That was me. Like, I spent a large portion of my high school kind of fantasizing and daydreaming about this future monogamous romance. Mm-hmm. So we had all this drama around getting engaged, but then we were both 20, July something or other, and we got married.
Yeah.
And we went on our honeymoon, and it was like, fuck this.
Our engagement was really, really fun. But then, like, man, that honeymoon hit. And it was like marriage it's not that I want to blame it all on the marriage, because I think there was a lot of other issues, but man, put a damper on our relationship.
And I don't want to paint it as like too hard, because I think a lot of people actually probably have a lot harder relationships, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It was very much a rude awakening. It wasn't like, I kind of pictured, I don't know, just like getting along and having sex and being in love, but it like stopped being that pretty quick. I mean, those were aspects of the relationship, but there was also now a lot of like fighting and crying and dealing with trauma. Mm-hmm. And stuff that ultimately I would decide many years later was much better. But at the time, I actually felt like I was being robbed of the romance that I was promised from all those years and all those religious books. And there was a huge emphasis, like, in our life and by many others that we were listening to at this time, of like two becoming one. Like, I mean, any identity that we had separately, like, no longer existed. We of course, had one house and one bank account, but we had also, like, one sex schedule, which sounds kind of weird to say, but I want to explain what I mean by that a little bit.
Yeah. Because
at this point, our goal and definition of faithfulness was, we believed that our sexuality fully belonged to each other and each other alone. Now, what this meant for us was that if I looked at another woman and there's a fine line between appreciating beauty, or if I was like, man, I could bang her. If that thought even crossed my mind, that would be unfaithful to Cammie. Like, Cammie is the only one I should ever want to have sex with or think about having sex with. And by the way, this for us and a lot of people we hung out with, not everyone, but extended to masturbation.
Yeah, what you did with yourself.
So I didn't feel at liberty to masturbate because I felt like even that was cheating. Like you had the monopoly on my sexuality, and any sexual enjoyment or pleasure that I had, physical or emotional, outside of you was cheating. Which, if you look at that for a second, let's take the word cheating out for a second, and let's just use like plain language, not loaded, which is if I was to masturbate, that would make our relationship less value. It would diminish its value. It would make you less special to me. That was what we believed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we thought about it. Are you okay? Can you?
Sorry. Yeah. I don't know why I'm starting to cough a lot.
All right, we'll just cough that way instead of...
Oh, sorry about that.
You are forgiven. Be at peace, child. And of course, so we're pumping out babies like crazy. Our sex life is, I don't want to say horrific, but I will say it was a battle. I'm like at this time in our marriage, I'm probably like a sex, like 6 to 7 times a week type of guy. You're a sex...
Like once a week, if that.
Type of gal.
It just... Are we talking about the first year of our marriage, or what are we...
I'm really going for the first 5 to 10.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know what I was. I really don't.
But I mean, you're pregnant, breastfeeding.
Once a week, if that. Like, it was, yeah.
And I don't believe I'm allowed to masturbate. So our methodology in this time period was once again still just to fight harder, because Cammie was so special to me, and our friendship was really deep, and I really cared about her, and we're raising 2, 3, 4, 5 kids together.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's my responsibility to show her how special she is. And I really do believe that she's special. And I'm like trying so hard because if I have a thought of another woman or masturbate, that means she's less special. And I really didn't believe that. So I felt like all these behaviors are tied together. So I'm going to 12-step groups and Sexaholics Anonymous and reading books like crazy and joining men's groups, all to try and like just fight harder for our relationship is the model we were under.
Right.
So I would say we were actually in that model for very close to 2 decades.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, married at least 15 years. We were doing this battle. But I was like, fuck it. It's worth it. She's worth it. Our marriage is worth it. Our kids are worth it.
And we saw some aspects get better. Like things weren't as hard as they were.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
So.
I mean, we matured and our kids started to grow up, and I would say we started to get more disciplined about certain things, and your sex drive started to open up a little bit. Yeah, and a lot of the kind of like, I don't know, franticness of our younger years and insecurities kind of wore off. But at the base of it all, there's still this battle, I think, which was more mine than yours, because your masturbation story can be told in one sentence.
Last week, it's not too far from the truth. Yeah. And what are you talking about? Your battle is...
My battle was faithfulness and fighting for the relationship.
Yeah. I think I had other battles. I mean, I had like the battle of where's my sexuality and where did it go? Like, because I had so much trauma around my own sexuality that I had to figure that shit out. But yeah, right. I think this was
okay. So we got to keep moving on here. So I would say we've shared the story of how we started going to counseling about 3 years ago as a result of being excommunicated from our community. And at the time, it wasn't excommunication yet. It was a spiritual discipline process. And I'll never forget this one appointment that we went to. And our counselor, who wasn't talking about a problem we were having. He was using another couple as an example. Mm-hmm. And he said that this other couple, the guy looked at porn. And the woman said, the wife said he looked at porn. And our counselor very calmly looked at her and said, so how does this impact you? Question mark. And something about that question stuck with me and jogged me because we were never in an environment where a follow-up question was necessary.
Yeah.
If someone said, Ben looked at porn, everyone in the room would have looked at me and said, like, you fucked your marriage over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you don't care about your spouse enough.
You're the problem.
You're the problem.
The porn's the problem.
And by the way, I completely agreed with that diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I say everyone, but I wasn't like a victim. I mean, and I did this to other people. This was...
Yeah. It was the only way to look at that whole issue was that way.
Which, because there's a couple ways we could look at it. One is like, oh, it's sin. Like, I shouldn't be looking at naked women that I'm not married to or something like that. But I think the most emotionally compelling one was every woman I look at that I'm like, oh, she's attractive. Her tits are nice. That's love that comes out of your pile that you're not getting.
Right.
Which,
so, or yes, that it's also somehow demeaning me because you find someone else also attractive. It's like, oh, well, that's a blow to you then, Cammie, isn't it?
Which there was one time I remember getting caught looking at porn by you because you were pretty fucking out to lunch.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it. Well, I don't know how much I did it actually because I don't really have. This was like before porn was super popular, online, and I went all over the map with frequency. I mean, there was times I gave it up for 6 to 12 months, and then there was times where I'd still do it every day.
Yeah.
But the time that you walked in, it was one of the most. It was just like, oh, crud. It was like, it was like I was fucking another woman, like a hooker.
Yeah.
And you walked in and caught me, and I just was there with my pants down looking at you and be like, no, baby, you're the love of my life. But then it had no weight.
And I remember feeling traumatized by walking in and seeing that on so many different levels for me. I didn't even know how to process it. I think I actually wouldn't have said this back then, but I think I felt like, dang it, I wish I hadn't walked in on him. Like that I wouldn't have to deal with this then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything good you remember? You had never seen porn. And you didn't even like sit and analyze this, but you like just the fact that it existed in your marriage was like now this daunting thing.
I mean, yeah.
And we could tell stories after stories of couples that have been divorced over this type of shit. Like, but that's not really the point. So just this question that this counselor asked, I think what it did to me is it showed that, oh, maybe there's a possibility that a man's sexuality, there's a part of it at least that belongs just to him. And if that's true, I mean, I'm saying it from my perspective, but if that's true, then there's a part of a woman's sexuality that belongs just to her.
Yeah.
And, what happens with porn and masturbation, there started to be this question mark now. The other thing that started to come up in our counseling was divorce. Once again, this wasn't our issue, but this is just hearing examples that our counselor used. We went into therapy very polarized. We were very, what's the word he used? Where we were very black and white and very...
Binary?
Binary, yes. Like, there was right and wrong, and there was good and bad, and divorce was wrong, always. It should be like the last resort. And one of the things our therapist did was he kind of like gave us these fictional examples every once in a while where he would say like, so what would you say to a woman that's like being abused by her husband? would you say she shouldn't get a divorce? And in the past, I just would have been like, no, she shouldn't get a divorce. Because like the marriage, like sacrificing the monogamy or the marriage or the hope for romantic love in the future was one of the worst things you could ever do. Mm-hmm. And I guess like where I want to go with this is the basis of this, the basis of believing that you should not sacrifice the romance and the marriage and the love and the exclusivity was because not only was Disney teaching us this, not only was Titanic teaching us this, but the church was teaching us this, not just for humanity, but we believe that that's what our relationship with God was like.
Yeah.
That God had chosen us specially and uniquely and exclusively, and that he was holding us tight to his bosom, and we were the apple of his eye.
And that marriage was supposed to be the ultimate picture of God's relationship with us. So if we fucked marriage up, then it was going to show everyone else, all the non-believers, it was all going to show them, I guess, that it would tarnish God's name somehow.
And because I had this like Disney Titanic view of marriage, or at least what I wanted marriage to be, which is why my honeymoon was so crushing or challenging to me, that's how I at least interpreted what I was being taught at most churches about what God's relationship with us was going to be.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a stretch. I think that there's a lot of people that actually flat out teach this stuff. So with, I don't know, getting into counseling, we started to now question, like we got separated from our community, and getting separated from our community, like I read some comment. I eventually blocked this person because she was pissing me off. Because I don't think she like listens to anything we say. And when we got separated from our community and we already talked about what our beliefs about the Bible started to be and things like that, there just started to be this domino effect where it's really weird, but I've heard a lot of people say this, everything starts to fall apart. And I'm not even saying that in a bad way. Mm-hmm. It's just like you realize, I thought everything was this little robust double-walled box that we had like built and was super secure. Mm-hmm. And you come to realize that it was like a fucking house of cards.
Well, so much of our belief, I think my belief system was held together because of a group of people, because of a tribe or people that, I don't know. And I didn't really think that that was true.
Yeah.
Like I thought, but like once that group of people dissolved for me, it gave me permission to think for myself because I didn't have this group of people to think for me. And once I started thinking about for myself, it's like, ooh, watch out, Pandora's box.
I realized that when I was in the group, there were certain places my mind would not go.
Yeah.
And I thought it was my choice. And I think part of it was.
Yeah.
But I think deep down, actually seeing what happened to us, it was also because I knew if I went there and questioned it, I would either be kicked out or accused of something. Because you can't just start questioning these things and be okay.
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of psychological term for group thought, like the reason why you shut off parts of your brain.
So, long story short, I want to share this definition of codependency that I just pulled up on Wikipedia, which is a behavioral condition in a relationship where one person enables another person's addiction, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement. Now, what I've observed a lot of in our life that my obsession with monogamy created within some of the spiritual circles we were raised in was it created this absolute blind eye to 95% of life. And I'm going to give you one example. in this culture, not being divorced, aka staying married or being monogamous, is one of the highest methods of assessing someone's spirituality. So therefore, when you walk in a room, like something that was very common was like, "Hi, I'm Ben." And very quickly, like you don't want to be all flashy about it because we are not wearing these like literal trophies, but it's because it's so heavily weighted, it's one of those pieces of information you can't go too long without knowing either. So the conversation very quickly lends itself towards like, "Oh, are you married?" And it's like, "Oh, how long have you been married?" Which could also be determined by how many kids do you have, which could also be determined by like, how old were you when you got married? Or like, there's all these different ways of getting to it. But the bottom line is, if you've been married for 30 years, people are going to be like, "Oh shit, we should listen to them." And if you've been married for 1 year, people will be like, they're rookies. Like, give them a little respect. And if you're not married at all, well, in a lot of circles, you may as well just be ignored. So what I started to notice, though, was that in our families and in our church circles, they would have these celebrations for people that had been married for 50 years. And it would be this huge celebration. But the relationship was this kind of like codependent, fucked up mess that was really like, to me, it was like an atrocity. Like, it felt like these people were facilitating and bringing each other down in life. Like, they weren't making each other better. Like, their only accomplishment actually was that they didn't get a divorce.
Yeah.
And that's actually what the church was celebrating by saying 50 years of marriage, good work, congratulations. Like, you didn't get a divorce. And it was like, oh, but your life sucks. Your kids hate you. Like, you have this massive like wake of destruction that goes unacknowledged. And you don't have sex with each other, but it's like, good job. Like, that's what we're supposed to celebrate. Like, that's what monogamy is or leads to, or that's it, you know? And I don't think that's actually what monogamy needs to be. So I'm not just trying to create a straw man and tear it down. But I guess I want to point out that when you emphasize monogamy as being one of the main goals so heavily, there was a disproportionately high number of people that were monogamous, sometimes barely, but it was a fucking empty shell of an existence that I didn't want to model my life after whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there wasn't the social pressure of you need to stay together, then so many of those relationships would have dissolved and probably should have dissolved. But because there was so much pressure to stay together, they stayed together.
So I think because of where we're at, like actually on the Fight for Together podcast, I remember there's a number of times where we would introduce ourselves and we would say, this is maybe a couple of years ago now, we'd say, "Hey, I'm Ben.
Cammy.
And we've been married for 19 years, blah, blah." And I realized that the reason why I would say that I've been married for X amount of time was it was kind of like my cred in that world. It was like my bling.
Right.
You know, to say we have 6 kids and are happily married was my status symbol in that old world. And that status symbol does 2 things. One is it told me that I still wanted to belong to that other world. And it also signaled to people outside that world, and this is what I didn't realize, it signaled to people outside of that, like, what if other people have been married for 12 years or 2 years? Or what if they never got married? They've just like been together for 19 years. It kind of was my way, and I don't think the church realizes they do this, but it signals to them, you guys are kind of less than. I view you as less than. Yeah. So as kind of an experiment, we stopped saying that. I mean, it started off as a joke for people that remember that podcast episode. We were just like, that's why this today started off kind of rocky and funny, because we were like, "I'm Ben.
I'm Cammy.
And we're partners."
You're like, "And we're a group."
Well, that's what I said today. But back in the day, we were just like, I don't want to use our love or relationship as cred for a certain subsect anymore. Yeah. In that world. Because we were starting to fall out of love with that world more and more, and it was falling out of love with us. But this is by no means us deconstructing monogamy at this point. But I want to share another similar idea that came to me around this point by an author named Walter Brueggemann, who I've mentioned before. He's an Old Testament scholar, and he wrote a book called Sabbath as Resistance. And he tells a story there about the people, the Israelites leaving Pharaoh's land in Exodus and going into God's promised land, and how this idea of the plagues and the Passover and the Exodus is really like the primary central story of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew scriptures. And he says, like, and when I heard him talk about this is maybe like 8 years ago, it was so important to me because he said, the Exodus is so important because you need to understand, like, what were the people leaving? I mean, in one sense, it's obvious. It's like Egypt, but was it just Pharaoh? Was he just a bad guy? Was it just like slavery, like actual physical slavery? And he said, God was delivering people from Pharaoh's economy. That was the word he used. And then he went down a list of a number of things, might have been 10, that depicted Pharaoh's economy. And the number one that I remember was scarcity. Mm-hmm. Pharaoh's economy, and Pharaoh was pushing scarcity, that there's a scarcity of glory, love, food, and resources, and I need to have a disproportionately high amount of them and control them.
Isn't that what capitalism is?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I think capitalism is based upon scarcity also.
Yeah.
Which kind of promotes this fear, and you work to build your pile higher.
Yeah.
But God in the wilderness, and this is what the 10 Commandments were based off of, were meant to refute. They were meant to refute Pharaoh's economy and to show people what God wanted his economy in the desert to look like and represent, which was not scarcity. It was the exact opposite of scarcity, which, as the story goes, the people were fed by what? Manna and quail and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, all that to say. So, and this is the basis for my knuckle tattoos, by the way, because I believe this concept so strongly of wanting to deliver people, including myself, from mindsets that are slavery mindsets into freedom mindsets, is I realized all of our perspectives on monogamy were based upon scarcity.
Yeah.
It said there's a limited amount of love. If I look at the hooker or the centerfold, then I have like 100 units of love. I just gave her 3.
Right.
That's 3 less that you have. Now you only get 97.
Right. Bummer
for you, because you were supposed to get 100.
Right. Ugh. Dang it.
And not only that, the place that this got really interesting for me was actually with God. We believe this very strongly too. We believe God has to hate sinners or unsaved people, or what were the bad words we used? The unchosen, the unelect, or not his people, whoever those were, his enemies. Because him hating them showed how much he loved and chose us. You know, and there's that classic text that's used to death is Romans 9, like, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Like, I mean, Esau, all the amount that he's unchosen and unloved is all to magnify how much Jacob is loved. And we used that verse and that idea, and we ran our entire lives with it.
Yeah.
And it was all based on this idea, I think. I mean, this is what I started to come to see. And I started to wonder does me appreciating a beautiful lady, does it have to mean I love Cammie less?
Yeah.
What if Cammie's okay with it? What if the beautiful lady's okay with it?
If I'm okay with it, then people will say, oh, well, you're either brainwashed or you're, you have a really low self-esteem.
They do that because they believe that you're being loved less.
That I'm settling for less somehow.
Yeah. No woman should settle for less than 100 love unit points.
Right.
what if I have 110? Or what if loving people, because what's weird about this is every other model that this is in, I don't think we see it this way. Like, for example, when you have a kid,
right?
Everyone says, oh, you're going to love this kid to death. It'll be the best thing that ever happened to you. And it was true. And then everyone's always worried, right, with their second kid. Because they're like, oh, shit, like, I loved this kid with everything. Now, all of a sudden, the second kid number 2 shows up, it's like you can't love kid number 1 with everything. You have to love kid number 2 with, in fact, almost everything. Because if you don't, they're fucking going to die because they're little helpless little naked rats. So all of a sudden, you feel like you're letting down kid number 1. But there's a transition period. And then what I learned with 6 is I feel like right now, Rainier in my life is helping me love Dove better. I think every child that we've had has increased my capacity to love. Yeah. Not every day or across the board.
I think this scarcity, love, monogamy mindset also has a really low, I don't know, low isn't the right word, but like fragile view of humans too. Like that humans only have so much love to give. And then if you tap them out.
Oh my gosh.
Then.
Fuck.
Oh.
I totally forgot to turn on my.
I got it.
Okay, you got it? We didn't turn on the. Oh, that's so much better. Oh, sorry,
good
guys.
thing we caught that at some point.
Okay.
But it just seems to me that it's so the view that you have on yourself or just humanity in general is that like, oh, we're so fragile and we have so little to give when it comes to love that you better hold on tight to, you know, this one relationship or, it seems like a kind of a sad story to me. Like is that it? Is that all we have to give?
Yeah. Yeah. So around this time, we started experimenting with how much we were going to fixate on marriage. And a few things that we did very practically, besides calling each other partners, was I took off my wedding ring, which wasn't like a super sacred thing to me because I got it. You
got it like, 12 years into our marriage?
I didn't have a wedding ring for the first 12 years anyways because we never exchanged them.
And then it never fit right. Is that correct? Or did you get it?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyways. Not that we need to disclaim why you took your wedding ring off.
I just stopped wearing it. I was like,
yeah,
I don't want to, whatever that status thing is, if our relationship is strong enough to have it, I don't want the wedding ring to be the thing that represents it. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
It's kind of like being in a club. And it was kind of a club. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's a club I didn't really want to be in anymore as far as like in. So I actually more recently, around the same time, but more recently, switched this is just the engagement ring that Ben gave me. Of course, I had it on my left finger. And it just like, it's like one of those things where I like looked at it and I was like, this doesn't symbolize who I am anymore. But I didn't want to not wear it because it still meant a lot to me and to you, the ring itself.
Yeah, I paid $229 for that thing.
I mean, it meant a lot emotionally.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
What the hell? Anyways.
On sale, actually.
So I switched it to my other hand and called it good. And I've pretty much gotten used to it.
And we went through actually a series of, we've been through some things. There's some stories to tell that I don't want to get into here because we're just not ready to share them. And I don't think it actually, we're just not ready to share them. I was going to say it wouldn't serve the point, but actually it would definitely serve the point. So I'm not going to make up fucking excuses. I'm just going to say that's not the focus of this episode. So stay tuned for that. But I do want to just focus on some of the lessons we learned in this time period for some of these emphasis shifts in our life. And I think we started to ask this question. At first, it was like, if we don't have to stay together, what's keeping us together? Mm-hmm. You know, if it's not these lifelong marriage vows. And I saw this video that was really helpful for me. It was just one of those Instagram videos. And the guy said, you know, he was talking about lifelong marriage vows that especially Christians or spiritual people make, where they say, till death do us part. And he said, death of what? Because, you know, most people are talking about physical death. And I get that. That was what we signed up for when we made that vow. But so much of our life had changed. We had died in actually so many metaphorical, emotional ways. We were such different people. I mean, really, our faith as we knew it had died. The faith under which we made those vows, our God had died. The God that we viewed under those vows.
Sorry. That was cute. Vows. Yes. God is dead. Okay, move on.
Oh my gosh. You're going to go to hell. Until we talk about how we don't even believe in that next week. So
stay tuned.
Anyways, I guess one of the conclusions I want to say that we came to in this time period, in answering all these questions and seeing like, oh wow, we still stuck around and we were still like actually best friends and we still worked the hell out of our relationship, but we were no longer like letting monogamy both protect and define us. And it did this really strange thing where I think it forced us to like, in some ways, work harder. And what I realized was monogamy, I think, was keeping us from facing our insecurities. You know how there's those women, for some reason it's always women, that are like, oh, you shouldn't wear that swimsuit to the beach. I never wear that stuff. I'm modest. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're fucking insecure.
Of your hips.
Or you're scared. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I see what else you wear and the way you flash around your money and the way you flash around this on social media, like, you're not like modest.
You're choosing what to be, quote unquote, modest with.
Yeah. So Christians are fucking wizards at being able to drop Bible verses as motivations for things, when in reality, a lot of women, in my experience in the church, were insecure and they used the Bible to defend that insecurity. But insecurity is very different from modesty. Mm-hmm. Insecurity is, I can't do that. Modesty is, I can and I'd be fine with it, but I choose not to.
Yeah.
So what I started to realize with our monogamy was, because I think in a lot of ways I was afraid of being alone, and I was afraid, I wanted to feel special, like that God had chosen me, and that was the theology I was handed, that when I stopped believing in those things, either with God or you, that would make me less special. And that was really scary to me. And I had to ask myself, is my specialness based upon a bunch of other people not being as special? Both either on this planet being married to you, or with my theology with God. And I realized that monogamy protects people from having to face that. So that people claim to be romantically, helplessly devoted in love. I don't think they're as devoted in love to a person oftentimes as they are to the idea of monogamy itself. Yeah. Because it's so damn convenient to and self-reinforcing to believe.
Yeah.
And I see like the ways that we face God in prayer, we're all like this romantic, monogamous perspective where he was like unshared and exclusive. And it's actually very recently, Cami and I both read this book called Sex at Dawn, which I cannot recommend because it is fucking boring as hell, unless you're just way into sex, which I am, in which case.
I really liked it, because I felt like it really helped me understand human sexuality.
I liked it too. I just can't recommend it.
Yeah.
It was too dry.
Well, as far as this subject matter goes, it might be the best out there.
So one of the topics they talk about is other cultures, which some are current, some are conjecture, because they're like prehistoric cultures. But some of the modern cultures they talk about are these non-monogamous cultures, which, by the way, we haven't even talked about this. Most of the Bible is non-monogamous cultures. So if you're going to be a biblical person...
Except for the Israelites, but even they were...
No, they weren't even... Like, most of the time, they weren't. I mean, Solomon had a fucking bazillion wives.
Yeah, but God, like, warned him against that, right?
Yeah, but whatever. And, I mean, there's a few verses in the New Testament that are like, the elders should have, like, maybe 1 or 2 wives or something like that, like, a little more particular. So this isn't, like, to say monogamy is, like, the only way spiritually is a relatively new and fringe belief historically and internationally. So this book, Sex at Dawn, it paints this picture of cultures that exist today where in the tribe, it's kind of assumed that you're going to like fuck around and you raise the kids together. And it's actually, if Cam and I start to develop a thing where I'm like, she's mine, that one's mine. And she's special to me and I'm special to her, then the rest of the tribe actually looks down on you because they see that type of engagement as threatening and less loving to the tribe. That type of ownership, which is what it is. It's like saying like, no, you're mine and I'm yours. And which was really fascinating to me because the way we grew up, the exact opposite was true.
That was security.
If you had eyes for someone else, it was assumed, oh, your marriage is going to fall apart. And this other tribe, and it's not just one, but I'm kind of like creating an amalgam of examples. Shit, we got to go with time here. So this is when I think a number of things have happened, and I really don't want to make this sound as if I don't want to religiously justify our actions because that's not how or why this happened. We kind of left the need to prove things biblically a long time ago. So if you're turning this into a Bible lookup thing, like you win, we lose, go away. But one of the things that we did do is we'd go back to the Bible and be like, oh, I wonder, that's weird. Like now that we have this mindset, it caused us to be open to look at things a little bit differently. And one of those things was God's love. And I started to imagine and read about and look at and wonder if maybe God's love was never about exclusivity. God's love was actually about inclusion and being able to hold it all together. What made him really unique was being able to hold the behavior that was classified as sin and the behavior that was classified as not sin together. And Jesus was able to hold together the death and the life. And Jesus like represented a lot more than that. And in a lot of ways, his actions on this planet were less about, because he did this crazy stuff, right? Where he hung out with prostitutes and he hung out with all the criminals. And we might say like, oh, Jesus was teaching us to hang out with prostitutes and women and criminals. But actually, if you look at a broader perspective, he was actually teaching us that it was less about women and criminals and more about how the boundaries that we created were fake. They weren't even real. Mm-hmm. Whatever image we have about like, oh, I'm this sex and you're that, or I'm not bleeding and you are, or you collect those type of taxes and I don't. He was like, you guys are fucking make-believe. Because in my world, those lines don't exist. Those lines don't matter. They don't need to matter.
Yeah.
There's no in, there's no out. There just is the reality that he can embrace. Mm-hmm. And I think, so much of our monogamy was this ultimate in and out and line. And I think we started to realize, is this like a social construct that we created because we couldn't handle being alone and we wanted to feel secure and good about ourselves? Or is it really like that important to God that you find one fucking person and you better find him young because otherwise you're going to be trying not to jack off an awful lot. So you find him around the age of 13 and you stay with them till you're 95 and you fuck them and only them and you never think about fucking anyone else. And every fuck needs to be with them. And that's what makes it special. Like, And that way of seeing the world started to feel a little...
claustrophobic.
Yeah, I was going to say silly, but the whole thing isn't silly, because I want to be clear again. I'm not against monogamy. In fact, I want to move into maybe... Oh my gosh, we got to go. I'm late. I want to get into, finally, how we see monogamy now, which is I see monogamy as a tool that's been very helpful for us for 19 plus years, coming up on 20 years. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a better tool than it is a perfect ideal. Mm. You know, when you hold it up as the ultimate end all.
That's where I think it gets dangerous and very limiting.
And in some ways, like, there's a metaphor there. Like, I think there's a valuable lesson. Like, it is nice to be loved by someone and to hold hands and to feel that feeling. Like, I love that. But we all know that comes and goes. And maybe that's like more of a metaphor than the goal itself. Maybe it's a stand-in for something that's actually more valuable or something that's more possible or among a broader range of people in humanity. And I guess the questions that I would ask people that are engaging in monogamy, which I'm all fine with, is, does your view of monogamy promote scarcity of love? And if so, is the scarcity real? Because what I've found is scarcity is great for short-term goals. Like when we're playing racquetball, we feel like there's only one winner, and it's not going to be you. I'm not fucking losing today. I'm not going home a loser, so I'm going to kick your ass. So we're like running around like crazy, being like, this point really, really matters. I got to do it. There's not enough points out there. Like, I got to get them all. And I do. And then I'm like, it fucking makes me work hard. I play well at racquetball.
And then you get a Gatorade.
And then I win a Gatorade. But that way of viewing life does not help me over the long run. That works for 15-minute spurts. You can't go your entire life believing there's not enough points out there. I mean, you can, but that's not the type of life I want to live. In the end of the day, I believe we're all good racquetball players. Like, none of it really doesn't really matter. Like, I don't need to beat you to have fun at the game. Like, we can all like be quote unquote winners or whatever.
Yeah.
So then I would ask, along the veins of codependency, is your perspective of monogamy promoting ongoing growth in your life? If it is, fucking great. Go with it. Have fun at it. No problem. No worries. I'm not trying to talk anyone out of it. But if it's not, maybe you need to like rethink what you're devoted to. And this is where like Peter Rollins, who I've mentioned a lot, has been very helpful to me in a number of his books and podcasts. And in his latest podcast about scapegoating on the Liturgist, he says this thing that's so funny. He says the same thing again in a million different ways. And he says that, ironically, most atheists and Christians are very similar. They both have this lack inside of them that they desperately lean into this belief system to try and cover up. And in his book, Divine Magician, he says, what we need to really be careful of isn't the belief system that we have. It's why we go to the belief system that we have. If you go to a belief system because you're uncertain and you're confused and you want clarity and security, it taints the belief system itself. You know, if you think Jesus came to deliver that for you, like security and peace of mind, it's like you're reading the book wrong or something. And I think in a way, like, I approached monogamy lonely, not wanting ambiguity, I was like afraid of rejection. And I was like, this is the perfect tool to lock me into a lifetime of feeling loved and secure.
Yeah.
And providing that for someone else too. It wasn't just one way. But after a while, I was like, what if love or relationships were never meant to do that to us? Mm-hmm. You know? So I guess I just want to leave with this question. Could it be that we idolize monogamy because we are afraid of the loneliness that it acknowledges when we don't agree on a solution? In a lot of ways, it's fascinating how we disagree on so much, but yet in a few things, we all love our veterans. we all kind of love idolizing, turning them into heroes, essentially turning violence into heroism. So we're all kind of agreeing, hey, like,
as long as it's violence directed the right way.
Yeah, directed out there to another country. Mm-hmm. And as long as you, it doesn't matter if you vote left or right or believe in this or that about pro-life, as long as you honor a veteran, you're like, oh yeah, we're kind of the same. And I feel like in the same way with monogamy, not everyone participates, not everyone I don't know, not everyone is successful at it, but everyone kind of agrees, oh, hey, that's the best out there, is to be in love with one person for the rest of your life.
Or be committed to one person for the rest of your life.
I wonder if that's I wonder why we all agree so much on that. Is it because we really are into the idea of pouring ourselves out for another and believe that's actually the best way to learn and grow and do it? Or is it more of is there something else going on? I don't know. Okay, that's it. I got to go. We're late. We went an hour and 6 minutes. Thanks,
or
guys.
Maybe there's
you're still going.
No other solution. Like there's no one's thought of another solution other than monogamy. A solution isn't I don't know. Anyways. See you next time.
I have no idea where you're going with that. I feel like you kind of went there, you kind of didn't go there. But I like it.
Yeah.
I'll be monogamous with you tonight.
We'll see.
Oh, dang. I'll put my wedding ring back on. I promise. I'll be faithful to you and you alone. Okay. Thanks, guys, for listening. If I would love to hear some of the ongoing discussion about this topic. Some of it will go on. There's a private Facebook group that the link is in the description. And this podcast is available on iTunes and all the major Google Play, Spotify, blah, 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 and also on YouTube if you're interested in seeing the video version there. You can leave us a comment on YouTube. We read all of those unless we block you, which happened this week. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Peace out.